All right, so the next three techniques go together very well. They're all related to a type of gap analysis. The first technique we're going to talk about is specifically named gap analysis, and it has its own method, if you will. But the other two techniques we're going to hit in this session are called interoperability requirements and business transformation readiness assessment. So in both of them, we're also basically looking for gaps. Gaps in one case in interoperability, the other case gaps in readiness. So all three are around the same theme. So let's start with the gap analysis technique, which is a technique in and of itself. So it's a way to highlight a shortfall between your baseline architecture and your target architecture. Specifically, the way it's set up, it can help us look for things that have been deliberately omitted, or keep track of things that have been deliberately omitted, discover things that have been accidentally left out or not yet defined. So basically the technique has a very simple approach that the rows of a matrix, the rows are the baseline. The columns are the target. And then the bottom row, that would be for new items, things that need to be developed or procured, whereas the right column are the eliminated items. So that would be things that you have excluded or omitted, whether on purpose or by accident. So once again, the rows are your baseline, the columns are your target, the bottom row is new, the right columns eliminated. So that's the basic technique. It doesn't have to just be a matrix in terms of like a diagram or Excel spreadsheet. It could also be a model you could drill down. Just give one example. Let's say that I have broadcast services in my baseline. And I look at my target and I have video conferencing, I have enhanced telephony, I have mailing lists, and I go, oh, I don't have broadcast. I don't have broadcast. What's going on here? Why isn't that in my target? Oh, because I intentionally eliminated it. So on my right, in the right column, I would write intentionally eliminated. So it's in my baseline, but it's not in my target because it's been intentionally eliminated. And now I can look at my, let's just say my columns, and I see mailing list services, and I check it against my baseline and it's not there. Why isn't it in my baseline? Well, because it's new. And so I'm going to take a note, and the bottom row underneath mailing list services, I'm going to note that that needs to be purchased or developed. Right? So that's the gap analysis technique. It could be a pretty big table if you have a large scope, of course. But that's it's very popular for keeping track of what's in your baseline versus your target, and what new things are coming in and what things have been eliminated either on purpose or by accident. And of course, if by accident, then it becomes a requirement, a gap requirement. Along the same lines of thinking, we have the interoperability requirements technique. In this one, we would be looking at our ability to share information and services now versus what we need in the target architecture. So the definition of interoperability is the ability to share information and services. So again, we would be looking in effect for a gap that could lead us to a requirement that we're going to have to satisfy. So we have different kinds of interoperability. You could have operational interoperability, you could have business interoperability. How are we going to share business processes? How are we going to share information? How are technical services going to be shared or at least connected to one another? These are all aspects to consider. We could look at integration interoperability for IT, for example. One would be from the lens of presentation. So we could look at what is the look and feel now for for access to this information versus what does the look and feel need to be. So that could be a type of way to look at interoperability change there, a requirement for change. We're looking at it from an information point of view, where the corporate information is seamlessly shared between various corporate apps to achieve, for example, a common set of client information. So what is that capability now versus what it needs to be? Looking at the information dimension there. Looking at it from an application perspective, where the corporate functionality is integrated and shareable so that the applications are not duplicated and are seamlessly linked together through functionality such as workflow. So the last two examples being, of course, what we're seeking versus what we have. So we would be enhancing the interoperability in those perspectives. And from a technical perspective, as we're looking for better interoperability, we'd be looking at common methods and shared services for the communication, storage, processing, and access to data, primarily in the application platform and the communications infrastructure domains. So from a technical perspective there, how can we enhance in a target architecture interoperability? Now, if we look at it in the ADM, in Phase A, Architecture Vision, we would look at the nature and security considerations of information and service exchanges, perhaps using business scenarios. Again, smartphone for hotel key. I want to do that, but I have a legacy hotel, and I'm going, how would this actually occur? Would this fit with my legacy hotel? Or am I going to have to renovate a hotel or build a whole new set of hotels in light of this vision here? So business scenario could help me sort that out. In Phase B, again, business scenario could also help there. But here we're actually looking at what information and service exchanges are occurring between different actors in different roles and different processes, supporting different functions, providing different services, all in that same little mini scenario that I provided. So what are the building blocks now in a legacy environment versus in a smart hotel environment where we have millennials who are totally hooked to their smartphones, and this is something they would expect and be very comfortable using. And so how could we show a business benefit and also ripple effects of that through our modeling and gathering then of requirements for change? If we're looking at it in Phase C, now we're looking at the content of information exchanges and looking at the associated information exchange models. So where's that information now in a legacy hotel environment versus a smart hotel environment, and what format would the data need to be in for the target environment for the type of real-time and even predictive information exchanges to occur regarding the scenario that we provided, or any scenario that's looking at next generation use of data, which we certainly are in this scenario. But think about scenarios where you're bringing in big data, analytics, you're bringing in predictivity, if you will, ability to predict things or even to automatically patch things if there's any kind of issue. So these are getting into pretty sophisticated things that also could be mashups between different apps. You know, again, apps that open your door, then could the same type of identity information associated with that might be able to allow you to open a safe or allow you to order dinner or show or what have you. So pay your bills. So this is all tied to the data being formatted to allow for this type of ease of use across applications. So applications then, in fact, being able to share information and services is an important aspect as well of Phase C. In Phase D, technology architecture, we want to make sure that the technical mechanisms are there that would permit information and service exchanges to occur, that would be well specified on how that would happen. So let's say that I come into a hotel, and in my scenario, and I want to use a brand new phone that just came out with a brand new browser that just was released, and I want to check in that hotel. Well, there could be an issue if the hotel hasn't upgraded to allow for this new type of device with this new type of browser. So those would be in the technical domain there under technology architecture. So obviously not such a simple problem. And what if there are new mandates for how messaging had to be encrypted to protect identities? So that would also have to be managed in the phase D area there, technology architecture. As we move into phase E, opportunities and solutions, this is where we're first looking at implementation, and where we would start figuring out what work packages are going to be required to satisfy the gaps that we've identified as we moved from A, B, C, and D into E. We've consolidated our gaps, and we want to come up with some work packages. So we need to start considering actual solutions. And these could be, again, tied to many different things. Solutions for the new roles, solutions for the servers, solutions for how to deal with different kinds of phones, different kinds of locks, different kinds of messaging protocols, security and training. And so it's not just technical here when we're talking about selecting possible solutions, or at least discussing different options for implementation. But this is where we first start doing that within the cycle of the ADM. We could have been doing this, of course, in a business scenario, but in terms of the ADM itself, this is the first time we're officially looking at possible vendors and solutions, or teams internally, or other elements. Especially in phase E, we're looking at the major work packages and the major sequencing of them. And then we continue into phase F, and we start to get more robust in terms of what are all the work packages and all the choices that take into account interoperability, not just of technical interoperability, but interoperability in terms of funding, in terms of information, in terms of people and process. So it's more open there. And we just say that interoperability in phase F needs to be implemented logically. Now, the next technique is the Business Transformation Readiness Assessment, and it's part of a program that came out of the Canadian government, which was called the Business Transformation Enablement Program, or BTEP. So in the TOGAF specification, we also refer to it, this technique, the BTRA, Business Transformation Readiness Assessment, as being part of a larger program, a Business Transformation Readiness Program. But basically the technique is the BTRA. So the BTRA helps us to evaluate and quantify an organization's readiness to undergo change. So we could say, what's our readiness now versus what it needs to be, looking at a number of factors and possibly leveraging maturity models. Let's say, for example, that we wanted to support the scenario of a smartphone for a hotel key, but then we find out that our maturity models for security are very, very lacking. They're very under-sophisticated. So we probably need to beef up our overall security maturity before we go too far down the path of using our smartphone for hotel key, because it could really cause quite a bit of chaos, and we wouldn't achieve our goals of growing revenue. We might in fact ruin our brand. So that's one consideration of how would I benchmark my readiness. There might be, for different dimensions of your opportunity, you might consider some existing maturity models. But if they don't exist, then you can just do a more subjective evaluation of what would be optimum readiness versus minimal readiness and where you think you are on that spectrum, and you apply that to all the readiness factors. TOGAF offers 12 readiness factors. They're notional, but they include such things as the vision for the transformation, the sponsorship, the funding, the IT ability to operate, the enterprise capability to operate and sustain. So just they're notional things, but on a scale of, let's say, 1 to 4, where are you at versus where you need to be? On a scale to 1 to 4, how urgent is it that you get there? On a scale to 1 to 4, how hard is it to get there? So there are many ways that you could slice and dice these readiness considerations in order to say, well, what are the risks here? So you're trying to determine risk based on, in essence, a kind of gap analysis between what readiness do you need for any one of these factors versus what readiness do you have. So again, it's a cousin to gap analysis, but it's focused on your readiness for change. And again, if you are not ready, there are going to be risks that you're going to need to address, and which we'll address in the next module.